Apparently, the Starliner crew is stranded on the ISS. I did not know that. I had not heard about this. So, needless to say, I am intrigued. And, like the title of this video suggests, what the hell happens next? Yeah, they've been there for a few months, yeah. So, Tyson recommended this. Let's take a look-see and see what happens. See what happens next. So, let's check this out.
On the 5th of June 2024 at 2:52 in the afternoon local time, the great and powerful Stage 1 engines of an Atlas V rocket roared to life. Sitting atop the launch vehicle, shaking and shuddering under immense force.
Wait, so what date was this? Yeah, this was June 5th. Yeah, this only just happened recently. Like, they only launched back in June.
V rocket roared to life. Sitting atop the launch vehicle, shaking and shuddering under immense force.
And yes, I have my sole license right now.
Brainchild and pride of the massive aerospace corporation Boeing. Inside the Starliner were two astronauts, both hailing from the United States. Barry Butch Wilmore of Tennessee and Sunita Lynn Williams of Massachusetts. Starliner and the two souls on board were en route to the International Space Station on what was meant to be Starliner's maiden crewed flight and the ultimate act of victory for the Boeing Corporation and its brightest minds. Luckily, this is not a story of catastrophic launch failure like the Space Shuttle Challenger, nor a story of catastrophic re-entry like the Space Shuttle Columbia. Just a hair short of the 27-hour mark after launch, the Starliner successfully docked with the International Space Station, and Wilmore and Williams floated safely into its confines.
Which, I will point out, they ran into trouble docking with the ISS. I remember that. When they were on approach, they were already having issues with their retro thrusters or their positioning thrusters. Just trying to dock with the space station in the first place. So already that was worrisome when that happened. Because I remember watching that live. They were on approach to the space station, and they were having a problem with their I forget which one. I can't remember if it was a port or aft thruster. But one of their thrusters malfunctioned, and that delayed their docking for several hours. So. Yeah, and Dorothy and Andrea, yeah, I remember that there was. It came out later that they knew that they were faulty when they launched them. So, I mean, that was already not boding well for Starliner. I have no idea what happened next, so I'm curious.
Becoming the newest members of the station's ongoing Expedition 71. But while we must emphasize that the successful arrival is a massive bright spot for the Starliner, it's about the only positive news that we can offer. Wilmore and Williams were supposed to be on a mission that lasted 8 days. At the time of writing, the mission has lasted for well over 80. And according to America's National Aeronautics and Space Administration, those two astronauts' ordeal is still only just beginning. The Starliner got Wilmore and Williams to space, but it can't get them back. And now these two astronauts are stranded in space for the rest of the year, and perhaps even longer. In today's special episode, we're going to be exploring the voyage of the Starliner, what went right, what went wrong.
Okay, chat. I will keep an eye out for news articles about Boeing engineers suddenly disappearing at this point. We know how Boeing handles these things.
Wrong, what happens now, and how these two intrepid space explorers will finally come home. About 2 months ago, we published an episode all about the Boeing Starliner, how it was conceived, why it was requested by the United States, how it was made, and how it had finally gotten itself all the way to being launch ready for the crewed liftoff that had at the time of writing only just taken place. We'll leave it to you to check out that episode after this one if you'd like to know the technical details, but for viewers who might not be familiar with the Starliner story, we'll run through an abridged version that's accurate, but perhaps not very forgiving. The Starliner was born out of an initiative a bit over a decade ago to see if NASA could outsource the work of designing, building, and testing space capsules.
Didn't we watch one of his videos several months ago, probably back in June, about how the Starliner How could it have beaten out SpaceX when it's built inferiorly? I'm pretty sure he put out a video, maybe not on this channel, but one of his other channels about the Starliner and the problems that's happening, like all of Boeing's issues with the Starliner. I'm reasonably sure he's already talked about that.
To America's private industry. It made good sense at the time. The space shuttle was soon to be retired, the Russians and their Soyuz space capsule couldn't be relied upon forever, but with Americans still shuddering from the aftershocks of the Great Recession, taxpayers weren't exactly eager to be building space junk out of pocket if they didn't have to.
Yeah,
and
Andrew, exactly right. I'm pretty sure that's what was pointed out in the other video that talked about the Starliner, is NASA gave it to Boeing because Boeing is a U.S. military contractor. SpaceX is a private corporation. So that's why they gave it to Boeing. Primarily is because they are a military contractor for the US already.
This was the early 2010s, a time of bold and idealistic fantasy around what private industry was capable of, and a time when the uber-rich of today had a bit more plausible deniability around the feasibility of their business goals and grand ideas than they do today. We're looking at you, Elon, and to the viewer at home, please don't forget about Elon during today's episode. He'll be giving us a couple of jump scares over the course of today's video.
Did you know most people get their space and science news from mainstream media? The issue is news either rarely covers these topics, or they sensationalize
Okay, I'm gonna go salt my water while we got
giving
ads.
the context to critically analyze. That's why I've partnered with Ground News on today's video. They're the brainchild of a former NASA engineer who wanted a more objective and data-driven way to stay informed. From gathering the world's news in one place to showing you each outlet's ideological slant and credibility to surfacing blind spots in coverage so that you can see important stories barely receiving attention. They do it all. Check out this new study on the heaviest antimatter hypernucleus researchers have ever found.
What was that, sir? Holy crap.
Hyperhydrogen-4, only 16 nuclei of this
Andrew,
have been
I don't
identified
know.
among the billions of
Like I said,
produced
I've been
pions,
out of the
making
loop
it
on
the
this, so
most
I
exotic
don't know.
antimatter nucleus ever found. With my Vantage plan, I have access to original research plus every article reporting on it for a more comprehensive understanding of this new discovery.
Corvid, I left you for
Much like
5
how the
seconds.
discovery of antimatter itself required physicists to think outside of traditional frameworks, I really think Ground News helps foster this same type of intellectual flexibility. It's available via app or desktop, and Ground News is giving
and I even made it back
40%
before the
off
ad is
same
done.
Vantage plan that I use for unlimited access to all their features. That's just $5 a month to push the boundaries of human knowledge. Subscribers fund Ground News so they can intentionally not rely on ads to remain as objective
That's
and as
yum
reliable
sounding.
as possible. So head over to ground.news/astrographics and scan my QR code to learn more.
If I'm feeling better, I'm gonna have to make some buffalo
enough
wings for my
to
lunch
bring you
tomorrow.
back rigorous analysis of today's current events. Thank you to them for sponsoring, and now back to today's episode. Boeing is one of several companies selected to put forward capsule designs along with SpaceX, there's our first Elon jump scare, and a couple of others that didn't get chosen. In its new corporate space race, Boeing was the odds-on favorite by a long shot.
I see
The company
it,
already had unbelievable numbers of aerospace engineers. It could cut incomprehensibly big checks, and it had the manufacturing capability to make 1,000 space capsules, not just the 2 that NASA was asking for. But fast forward a decade after NASA locked Boeing and SpaceX into their competition, and there's no other way to put it. Boeing lost. As of now, SpaceX and its capsule, the Crew Dragon, have carried well over 50 passengers to orbit with a steady rhythm of manned space flights, suffering a grand total of 0 accidents across the duration. On the other side, despite initially scheduling a crewed spaceflight for the first time in 2017, it took all the way until 2022 for Boeing to even dock an uncrewed capsule to the ISS. The Starliner's test history.
That's where the warning bells should have been going off. Is that SpaceX had a flawless track record. Say what you will about Elon Musk. Whatever your opinion is on Elon Musk, SpaceX, its track record does speak for itself. Whereas Boeing actually had to delay their unmanned spaceflight for 5 years just to prove that the fucking thing would dock properly with the space station. Yeah, and what is it? Blue Horizon, which is Bezos' thing, is still only doing suborbital. It can't even, clear. It can't even clear. Blue Origin, yes, thank you. Okay, Blue Origin. It's not even clearing, clearing the atmosphere. Or it's barely. Yeah, I don't even think it's clearing the atmosphere entirely. Virgin Galactic, I actually have not heard about for a very long time. Is Richard Branson still doing Virgin Galactic? Because I have not heard a fucking thing about that in years. And honestly, I don't hear all that much about Blue Origin either. And yeah, Kaibo, you're right. Boeing has turned into an absolute shitstorm. They've been taking major L after major L for probably the last 2 years now, because there was that one issue. I think it was last summer, was it? Where it was either 737 747s, the computer software was fucked up, and pilots were like crashing planes because they were not trained on the new software from Boeing. You've got this shit with the Starliner. You've got their people that are coming forward saying, yeah, Boeing is fucking around, and people are finding out, and they're ending up dead. Like, shit is going sideways with Boeing real quick. And you have to wonder how deep into the pockets of the U.S. government are they that they're still maintaining their contracts. Yeah.
Has been a mess of warning signs and red flags, all smoothly accounted for and explained by Boeing's people at the time, but stacking up in a way that brought public skepticism toward the program ever higher. For the Starliner's critical pad abort test, Boeing declared a success
That's what I meant by
despite
that.
one of the capsule's 3 parachutes not opening. For its first uncrewed space flight, an issue with the mission clock on board caused it to be inserted into the wrong orbit, miss the ISS, and fall to Earth way ahead of schedule. In its second uncrewed space flight, the onboard thrusters malfunctioned, even despite a successful docking to the ISS. All the while, the Starliner's press headlines were a mess of delayed launches and technical problems on the ground. When Boeing and NASA came to terms to have their first crewed flight test of the Starliner in 2024, a grand total of 0 pad or spaceflight tests had gone off without a hitch.
Well, Kaibo, Boeing, and all of these other companies, regardless of what they're in the business of, all of these companies are into the find out portion of the SAFO. We are absolutely into the finding out portion because they are. These companies, they're finding out the hard way what doing this will result in. And for Boeing, it's resulting in everything they're doing to just be completely fucked, and no one trusting them. Like, I'm sure they're probably still going to retain their military contracts, but honestly, like, they need to be reevaluated. They really do. And Boeing is just one example. All of these companies were doing FAFO with their hiring practices. They're into the FO portion right now.
The program was $1.5 billion over budget, and now 2 very, very, very brave astronauts were going to get inside it and hope for the best. Even the crewed spaceflight would be beset by more delays prior to launch. First due to a problem with the oxygen valve on their Atlas rocket, then due to a helium leak from a thruster used to maneuver in Earth's orbit, and then due to a failure of an onboard computer to synchronize with the 2 other redundant computers on board. On June the 5th, 2024, the Starliner achieved crewed liftoff, but almost immediately, the trouble started up again. On the way to the ISS, Starliner detected 2 helium leaks that had knocked out several aft thrusters on the Starliner's service module, plus
this is the one I was talking about.
System using more water than it should have. Wilmore and Williams had to take over manually during the docking process with the ISS, compensating for the system failures with their own experience. Luckily, that portion of their mission went well, and Wilmore and Williams were able to dock and get out of the Starliner before any further problems came up. But the Starliner's first crewed mission, despite being a technical success, had raised a whole bevy of other concerns. And, well, there were a lot more to come. In the hours following the Starliner's successful docking with the ISS, Wilmore and Williams were able to work with Boeing engineers at Mission Control and eventually bring 4 of the 5 failed thrusters back online. The onboard water cooling tank was refilled, and Boeing made it clear in press statements that future vehicles would include a larger water tank from the outset. The issue with the thrusters was...
Yeah, I'm sorry, but when you're talking about astronauts' lives on the line, we'll fix it in post is not an inspirational comment. That would be like, okay, why did you not anticipate this before now? You supposedly tested this. So why are you only figuring this out now? Like, this seems like it might be a little bit basic. And, like, who has confidence in this anymore? I sure as fuck don't. I don't have any confidence in Boeing anymore.
Was identified as a possible software glitch, and the helium leaks were assessed to not be threatening to anybody on board, with the helium remaining in the Starliner being sufficient to supply the rest of the scheduled mission. Sure,
Exactly,
Boeing would
Joshua.
perform further analysis and figure out what had caused the helium leaks and the thruster deactivation, but according to the company, there was no cause for any broader concern, said Boeing's program manager for the Starliner, Mark Nappy, in a press conference after the ISS docking. Quote, "We have two problems on this vehicle right now, the helium leak and
Yeah, Leo, the same people said the same thing about Starfield. Like, oh, once you get like 20 or 30 hours in, it's enjoyable. It's like, okay, I don't want to have to spend 20 or 30 hours playing a game I don't enjoy before it actually becomes good. That's not a selling point.
figuring out how to fine-tune these thrusters
Oh wait, we have two problems on this vehicle right now, the helium leak and figuring out how to fine-tune these thrusters so they're not selected off. Those are pretty small, really. I would disagree. Issues to deal with, and we'll figure them out before the next mission. Boeing, this is not a video game. This is not something that can be fixed with a day one patch. You fuck up, even incrementally, people die. You know, figure out how to fine-tune the thrusters. Those are kind of important when you're in space. And they're kind of important when you're trying to do a re-entry. And the level of spin is they're trying to play this down, and I don't think anybody's really buying it. I don't think anybody's buying this. It's fine. Like this right here is. I wish I had. I need to get a soundbite for him. This is the critical drinker going, nah, it'll be fine. I need to add a soundbite for that to my soundbite board. That's this right here. This is them saying, nah, it'll be fine.
So they're not selected off. Those are pretty small issues to deal with, and we'll figure them out before the next mission. It was par for the course, matching up closely with what outside observers had come to expect from the folks in charge of the Starliner. Sure, there were minor issues, but they'd be fixed before the next launch, and that next launch could proceed as scheduled. In this particular case, NASA's Commercial Crew Program, the program overseeing the collaboration with Boeing, added that some of the issues, particularly with the water...
Well, Hybo, it's not a matter of will they have confidence in it. They don't have a choice. That's the thing. They don't have a choice. The alternative is they stay on the ISS for the rest of their lives, and that's not an option.
Cooling system were not unlike problems that have plagued the space
and
shuttle.
Yeah,
for its
Atash, they're catching a ride back from the Dragon, aren't
they? To continue their mission as planned, assessing the Starliner for its ability to accommodate crews of 4, seeing what it's like to sleep in it overnight.
Oh, hey, I'm
testing
back it up.
its
I missed a couple here.
30-year history. Wilmore and Williams were to continue their mission as planned, assessing the Starliner for its ability to accommodate crews of 4, seeing what it's like to sleep in it overnight, and testing its functionality as a safe haven in case something were to happen on board the ISS. The two astronaut schedules were known to be packed in an all-out sprint to collect all the necessary data over 8 days before they eventually came home. As for their journey home, NASA officials noted that the Starliner's 2022 uncrewed test had also seen several thrusters go offline, but rather than make the point you might fairly expect that this is apparently a recurring problem, the point of noting such a repeat issue was to emphasize that both times the thrusters had been brought back online and last time they'd worked fine. Wilmore and Williams.
Okay, I'm making it my mission. I'm going to get the soundbite of, nah, it'll be fine. I'm putting that fucking sound clip on my soundboard. It has to be done.
Did all the typical ISS things, posing for photos and ringing the station's bell to signify a successful arrival before getting to work on the laundry list of tasks Boeing and NASA had so thoughtfully provided. But as the days wore on, more bad news arrived. In addition to the 2 helium leaks that had popped up on the way to the ISS, multiple other leaks were identified after Starliner was already docked. Testing in orbit was not able to identify the root cause of the leaks, although they did stabilize by June the 28th, the full 23 days after the astronauts had been sent to space and 15 days after they were supposed to come home. Obviously, it should go without
Corbin, they are saying that they had the same problems last time, but they were able to eventually get them online, so it's fine. So they knew the problem existed, but they didn't fix it. That's what it was. They knew about the problem existing, and they were able to correct it during their test or what have you. And so instead of going, let's see why this happened in the first place so we can prevent it, they went, okay, well, we were able to correct it mid-flight, so it's fine. We'll just leave it alone.
Saying that by then, their mission had been extended, although NASA and Boeing alike were careful to word their press statements gently and avoid causing alarm. There was, of course, a bright side, as NASA pointed out. The Starliner had only been rated for a maximum duration of 45 days in orbit, and its performance thus far had been so very good aboard the ISS that it could probably stay for longer. After all, operational Starliner missions are rated to stay in space for as long as 210 days, and Calypso, the capsule currently docked to the ISS, was built to handle proper operations, not just test flight. As for Wilmore and Williams themselves, they're in a bit of a tough spot. Since they'd only anticipated being part of a week-long mission, they had packed light, with only minimal personal belongings and little to do once their initial checklist was complete. They didn't even bring their own toiletries, assuming that they would be there for such a short time that they could just use spares from the space station. Not only that, but NASA needed a little bit of extra space to deliver a new toilet pump, which was, per the astronauts on board the ISS, pretty urgently needed. While the ISS does have extra food and cargo resupply missions that delivered general supplies, including even fresh produce, the process involved with actually getting Wilmore and Williams things there is a process on the order of months, not days. Till then, everything from changes of clothes to basic individual comforts will be sorely lacking, let alone things like medications that, to be clear, we in the public don't and probably shouldn't know whether either astronaut needs. They aren't.
Kinda begs, you have to wonder when these two finally get back to Earth, are they just gonna be like, fuck this shit out, don't ever send me into space again, I'm done? You have to wonder if they, you have to wonder how this is going to affect them psychologically once they return to Earth. Because that's a consideration for astronauts too. How are they going to be affected psychologically after all this? Don't forget there was that one astronaut who went psycho, crossed multiple state lines to murder her lover. Or murder her lover or murder her lover's wife or something like that. Like, astronauts can go psycho. Hello, Albrecht.
The only astronauts to suddenly find themselves in an extended stay.
Not quite
Such
wealthy, but
aren't terribly
point
unusual
taken.
across history, and as recently as 2022, astronaut Frank Rubio had found out the hard way that his planned 6-month stay would last for over a year. But the simple fact that Wilmore and Williams aren't the first to deal with such an adjustment doesn't make it any easier. Publicly, the pair's morale has been shown to be high. They've shifted into support roles to help out with the other tasks and experiments going on board the ISS.
They are scheduled to return February 2025.
Jesus, really, Atanashi. God. So they're stuck up there for another 5 months. Wow. That's going to take the toll, and they probably have families waiting for them. That is going to take such a toll on them psychologically, and that's before we even get into the physiological issues. Like, Andrew, like you were saying, loss of bone mass, loss of muscle mass, radiation exposure, Yeah, this is going to take a fucking toll on them.
They even took part in a little microgravity version of the Olympic Games, broadcasting back to the people of Earth. Williams, in a prior ISS mission, became the first person to finish a modified triathlon in space and ran along with the Boston Marathon back in 2007, so if the crew had bothered picking a gold medalist for their event, she would have probably won it. Among the two astronauts' work, they'll be helping to cultivate space plants, which are, to be clear, normal plants that just happen to be in space, and exploring methods to produce fiber optic cables in orbit. They'll soon be taking on spacewalks too. NASA has made it clear that both Wilmore and Williams knew the risks of taking part in a test flight, and that they did have the basic supplies on board and the mental preparation to deal with the surprise extension of their stay. They'll also be
Okay, there is a difference between knowing the risks and knowing that you may have an extended stay if things go sideways, and, oh, yeah, you were only supposed to be up there for 8 days, and now you're going to be up there for, let's see, June, July, August, September, October, December, January. Yeah, 9 months. That's a big fucking difference. And you can prepare all you want. Being told, yeah, your 8-day trip, your 8-day stay is now turning into a 9-month stay, minimum. Because who knows if more shit's going to go sideways for the return trip.
Ember, Earth makes a sound we're used to. When it is gone,
Yes,
astronauts say
Wolfie.
it messes with their heads. They can't
Yep.
eat or sleep. Maybe if that goes on for long enough, you lose your mind.
Yes, Wolfie, you're correct. The Earth has the subsurface of Earth emits a hum. The Earth's doing its thing in its core, in its mantle, etc., generates a subsonic hum that no one can hear, but you can feel. That is a very real thing, and when you are in space, you don't experience the Earth's hum. And that can cause significant psychological issues. That is actually something that we as humanity are going to have to contend with if we are ever going to start exploring amongst the stars. So all the, Star Trek, Star Wars, Elite Dangerous, all of these, sci-fi space adventures where we are away from Earth, that's something that we're going to have to deal with, is the absence of the Earth's hum. Because it can cause significant psychological issues. Wolfie, it's not a question of all planets have a core of some sort. But it would not be the same. It would not be the same hum as the Earth's. So on a subconscious level, you would be noticing a significant difference. And that's something we're going to have to contend with.
be able to make full use of email, phone calls, and video conferencing to remain in touch with their families back home. Wilmore has a wife and 2 daughters, while Williams leaves her husband back on Earth. As the days ticked by and the ISS completed trip after trip around the Earth, the astronauts' stay became longer and longer. Ground crews back at NASA's testing grounds worked to figure out the thruster and helium issues using replicas, and Boeing executives worked hard to keep the public morale out of the red amidst a difficult summertime news cycle related to its terrestrial operations. NASA worked long and hard on a review of the situation.
Pactra, the moon, yes. I'm not sure Mars has a dead core. I am not entirely sure Mars has a dead core. Given the fact that there is liquid water present underneath the Arctic caps, that makes me think that Mars has a live core, not a dead one. I don't know for sure. I haven't actually looked into it, honestly. But the evidence of the surface with polar caps, liquid water being present underneath the polar caps, that makes me think the core is not dead. It cool, perhaps, yes, but even if it's cooled, it's still humming, so to speak.
Trying to figure out when and how it would be safe to bring its 2 extra astronauts home, while working out adjustments to keep the ISS from getting too overcrowded in the interim. NASA really really doesn't like to use the word stranded, and issued ample statements insisting that the word doesn't apply here. But the situation was what it was, and it didn't get better. Weeks turned into months, and all the head
it's
scratching
functioning
over
at
the
such a
Starliner's
low
technical issues
rate
led to no
that
identification
it can't
of any
support the
root
magnetic
cause.
sphere.
It did, however, lead to more bad news. Because the smaller thrusters of the Starliner were apparently being heated up unexpectedly by the larger thrusters, there was no guarantee that they would perform well enough during a return flight to safely deorbit and get the Starliner's passengers back to Earth. Finally, in late August of
Big shock,
2024, nearly
Kaibo.
3 months after the Starliner had lifted off, NASA gave its answer. Speaking to the press, NASA's lead administrator, Bill Nelson, explained, quote, "Spaceflight is a risk, even at its safest and even at its most routine, and a test flight, by nature, is neither safe nor routine. Our core value is safety, and it is our North Star. The decision has been made to extend the pair's stay on the ISS until February 2025. All told, Wilmer and Williams would spend a total of more than 8 months in space, and there was nothing anybody could do about it. Here is the plan as it is at the time of writing. In early September of 2024, just a few days away at the time of writing, the Starliner currently in orbit, the Calypso capsule, will undock and deorbit by itself. The plan is to bring it back safely, something that Calypso's onboard systems can do autonomously without pilot input. Then NASA's next launch into orbit will come a couple of weeks later, possibly as early as September the 24th, but although that launch had been slated to carry 4 astronauts into space, it will now carry 2. That leaves 2 more seats for Wilmer and Williams, who will remain in orbit and take the spots of the 2 astronauts who are staying home over the duration of what was supposed to be a roughly 5-month mission. They'll miss the holiday season, they'll miss the opportunity to see their families on anywhere near the timetable they expected, but the work of the ISS will continue as planned. Judging by a revealing snippet from one high-level NASA official, internal concerns about the risk involved with the Starliner were apparently higher than NASA had let on, quoting, "The polling was unanimous amongst all the NASA folks." Per that same official, Boeing had offered sharp disagreements in its risk assessment, saying that the Starliner had been demonstrated sufficiently safe to get Wilmer and Williams home. When it came time for NASA to give the public news of their decision, Boeing officials were conspicuously absent. But in fairness, Boeing has ample reason to be frustrated with its situation right now. Not only will its supposed crew capsule be sent back to Earth without a crew, dealing the company yet another in a long and cripplingly painful series of recent bruises, but the astronauts left stranded in space will need to come back on somebody else's space capsule, not a Starliner. And
that's gotta sting.
Possibly have saved the day, but the up-and-coming inventor turned modern gigabillionaire Elon Musk. There's the second Elon jump scare. We promise it'll be the last one today. It's the SpaceX Crew Dragon that will carry these 2 new astronauts to space to join the crew of the ISS, and it'll be the SpaceX Crew Dragon that will do what the Boeing Starliner couldn't. The irony has, of course, been lost on absolutely nobody. Marina Curran wrote in The Atlantic, "When the astronauts Barry, Butch, Wilmer, and Sunita Sunny Williams launched to the International Space Station on June the 5th, they flew on a Boeing spacecraft and wore the company's bright blue spacesuits. On the way home, 8 months after their scheduled return, they will likely ride in a SpaceX vehicle dressed in sleek white suits, designed with the aesthetic sensibilities of that company's CEO and chief engineer in mind. Elon Musk to the rescue." Of course, it's important to emphasize that
this has got to butthurt so many of the Elon critics. All of the Elon critics right now are probably so butthurt by this, it's hilarious. Because there are millions of people that hate Elon simply because he just kind of speaks his mind. They hate his politics, whatever. They've got to be reeing like crazy right now because of that. Okay, Barb, get some rest. Go get some rest.
There are still no true guarantees about what comes next. Perhaps weather conditions on Earth will make for yet another pushback in their expected return, and then another and another after that. But what they likely won't have to contend with, at least not anymore, is a spacecraft that simply can't be trusted to do the job. Instead, they'll ride home in a proven craft, one that may not have had its own design and development go exactly to schedule, but that has proven itself head and shoulders above the spacecraft that was supposed to beat it in a landslide. Now, we're reasonably confident that the Elon-inclined viewing audience are at this point waiting for us to say the magic words, SpaceX won. Unfortunately, to declare a total victory for SpaceX at this point would still be premature, but it isn't far off. When the Starliner deorbits, it'll face yet another critical test. If its thrusters really do prove unable to take the heat, if it suffers from other unforeseen issues, and if something happens on board that indicates Wilmer and Williams would not have made it home, if they took the spacecraft that Boeing insisted was safe, then yeah, it'll be a total victory. The same is true if these issues happen again, even after an intensive review process that should have fixed them, or if a new set of issues arise the next time NASA tries to use the Starliner. At this point, the program has cost far too much, taken up too much time, and caused too many headaches for it not to get a second chance, in hopes that all that hard work might eventually pay off. But to say that an
this
eventual
is a
payoff
cut your
likely,
losses moment, I
at this
think.
stage, well, we're sure Boeing is making that case just fine without any help from us. The story of the Starliner is not yet written, and based on all we know of Butch Wilmore and Sunita Williams, they are both far too professional and far too pragmatic to say that Boeing's great experiment is a failure. We won't make such claim either, and certainly not while the Starliner hasn't even come back to Earth. But the simple reality of the Starliner mission is that this beleaguered capsule brought 2 people to space and couldn't bring them home. For the sake of NASA, for the sake of Boeing, for the sake of spaceflight, and most of all for the sake of the next crew to lift off in the Starliner, we certainly hope that this will be the last of the capsule's troubles, but we're not optimistic.
Nope. And honestly, this is a situation where NASA and the U.S. government need to cut their losses. They need to cut their losses and say, you know what? No. You had your chance. You fucked it up 6 ways to Sunday. And they need to go with the proven track record. That's it.
Boeing be like, fuck it, we do it live.
Yeah. NASA and the government need to cut their losses. They may not like Elon, but he has a proven track record. Fuck it. Go, make the smart choice.